to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Newly crowned IBF welterweight champion Jaron Ennis dares Terence Crawford, come get your belt back.
It's easy to issue a dare like that when you know that Terence is all tied up with that Errol Spence Jr. rematch, the rematch clause that Errol activated.
We've already been through the opportunities that Jaron Ennis missed, willfully missed, to face Terence Crawford before Terence fought Errol Spence Jr. What we're looking at now is a smear campaign. I've just got to keep winning and making noise, Ennis told YSM Sports Media during a recent interview. Keep stepping on these guys. They've got to see me. But who's actually left at welterweight to see Jaron Boots Ennis when most of the big names that were there are not there now? Sean Porter retired, Danny moved up, Errol and Terence are about to, leaving only the faded husk of Keith Thurman, who would likely ask for a fortune to share the ring with Jaron Boots Ennis. He's supposed to be en route to fight a Montestanionis.
That's two guys Jaron Ennis may not get to fight in the near future, in his next fight.
Leaving only Mario Barrios, who is a familiar name, though not a big one. It's not like Mario has some big following, and the only reason that people are familiar with him is because of the fighters that beat him. Gervonta Davis, who knocked him out, and Keith Thurman, who beat him on points. He might be coming off a win over Yordenis Ugas, but since when is beating Ugas a crossover fight? A big deal.
It isn't. Even if by some chance Jaron Boots Ennis can get Mario Barrios in the ring and he beats him beating him is a foregone conclusion.
As it pertains to Terence Crawford, in a fight with Terence Crawford, whether he's an undisputed champion or not, Crawford believes that he's the best fighter on the planet. Ennis, though, with the IBF title draped over his shoulder, wants him to prove it. Does he really? Come get your belt back if you think you're the best in the world. And once again, that's an easy challenge to issue out when you know he's otherwise preoccupied, when you know he's not free. When he was free and they sent for you, wanted to do a fight with you, you were more concerned with being loyal to Showtime, who you're not even signed to, than you were with getting Terence in the ring. The moral of the story is, you snooze, you lose. But that's assuming Jaron Ennis ever even wanted that fight, and I don't think he did then. I don't think he does now. What I think is this is a smear campaign that relies on the principle that Terence didn't want to fight you, doesn't want to fight you, even though he already sent for you. We've already been there and done that when it comes to the whole Crawford and Ennis stuff. What I see now,
that most people aren't talking about. What could be a huge problem for Jaron Ennis moving forward is depending on where he goes and depending on where he ends up.
he may never live up to people's expectations of him. They want him to be the next Sugar Ray Leonard, the next great welterweight in the welterweight division, when the truth is, I don't know if that's gonna happen. You see, Jaron Ennis was not an, according to Hoyle, PBC fighter. He wasn't actually with Al Heyman. He's with Cameron Duncan, and Cameron Duncan had a deal worked out with Showtime. That's the only reason you saw Jaron Ennis on those PBC cards. Now that Showtime's out of it, and Jaron Ennis needs a broadcaster, he needs a platform to fight on. If he goes with Al Heyman,
how busy can Al Heyman keep Jaron Ennis? Because Jaron Ennis doesn't fight enough.
needs to be busier. He's not well known enough here and now that he should only be boxing once or twice a year. Last year, he only fought once. This year, he only fought twice.
He's not well known enough that he should only be boxing 2 times a year. And in the absence of big names and signature fights, the next best thing to get him known, to get him talked about, is to keep him active. As Gennady Golovkin was many years ago when he was avoided. What got him known was that he was consistently getting out there and consistently beating people up. He was active.
What they think is that running Terence Crawford's name into the ground, this little smear campaign, that attaching Jaron's name to his and...
That's only gonna get you but so far. It's no substitute for fighting and winning.
Hey, Montestanionis, Radzov Butaev, maybe Michael McKinson, whoever's out there, whoever's still left at welterweight. These are the guys that Jaron Ennis needs to be fighting, and he needs to be fighting at least 3 times a year, because he's not well known enough here and now that he should only be boxing twice in 1 calendar year. And if you think this Terrence Crawford stuff is gonna get him anywhere, it isn't.
What is it with American fighters these days? The smoke, the mirrors.
The he said, she said, and the Real Housewives of Atlanta routine. I mean, really, what is it? Do you actually think any of this has any bearing on the paying public? You know, the people who actually spend money to see boxing. It's them you want to appeal to, not the mouth breathers on social media, not the bozos and the deadbeats on Twitter.
And not the content creators sucking you off for access so they can have something to upload to their YouTube channels. It's not them. You need to be in your corner.
It isn't. If the goal is to make Jaron Boots Ennis a draw unto himself, short of big names and signature fights, activity, sheer activity, fighting on a regular basis, getting out there, getting seen, racking up wins and racking up knockouts. That's the best way to go. And I don't know if Al Heyman can do that for him. There's a rumor that Al Heyman is in the process of trying to sign Jaron Boots Ennis. Though if he does, can he actually get him exposure when all of his fights and all of his fighters are behind a paywall?
Almost every fight he's done this calendar year was a pay-per-view. And rumor has it that all he has on the table is an Amazon distribution deal for pay-per-views. More pay-per-views.
You're only going to get so many eyes on them, even when it comes to the big ones, being buried on the undercard. So if Boots goes with that guy,
There's going to be a cap on how many people see him, and there's going to be a cap on how far he can go.
and just in keeping with the theme of all things PBC fighters, Andy Ruiz wants Zhang, Anthony Joshua trilogy, or Wilder in the coming year. We know that the door is pretty much closed for an Anthony Joshua trilogy, at least right now. And Wilder's supposed to be boxing Anthony Joshua if he makes it past Joseph Parker. I think Zhang did an awesome job. Joe Joyce is like a robot. He just throws punches and doesn't even move, Ruiz told BoxingScene.com and other media in an interview. I think Zhang is a really good fighter. That's a good fight that I'll take too. Ruiz remembered facing Zhang in the Olympic trials in Beijing before turning professional in 2009. Zhang is a 2008 Olympic silver medalist. I lost the decision. I think I did really well, but they gave the fight to him. If Ruiz can't challenge Zhang, he wants to face Deontay Wilder as well as Anthony Joshua in a trilogy.
The story, according to Team Wilder, was that Andy Ruiz had the opportunity to fight him, but he wanted too much money. And right before news broke of that big Saudi card in December, the story was that both Andy and Wilder were revisiting talks to potentially do the fight next year. As it stands, Wilder's busy.
Those plans have changed. He's boxing Joseph Parker now, and if he takes care of business, the plan is to have him box Anthony Joshua 2 times next year in Saudi.
Anthony Joshua's boxing Otto Wallin.
When I fought in the rematch, I wasn't good. I was overweight. I forgot everything that I was doing. Now it's a whole different ball game. All I want to do now is just show my talent, and everyone is going to know who the heck is Andy Ruiz Jr. Of course, I'll go over there in the United Kingdom to fight Joshua. I don't think they want to fight. I think Matchroom Boxing head Eddie Hearn is already traumatized. He doesn't even want to fight Joshua against anyone good, unless he's just trying to get his money. Some would say that Otto Wallin is a good choice, a solid choice. He's never been knocked out, and he gave Tyson Fury all he could handle when they fought. One fight that Andy Ruiz is not looking forward to, however, is a contest with former heavyweight champion Charles Martin. He tried to call me out. I want to fight the fat boy, but come on, man, I can't go backwards. I beat the guy, Joshua, that beat him. So there's no point, said Ruiz. I need to get somebody else, somebody that will be good for me. I beat his ass in sparring with one hand when I was hurt. He doesn't want to fight Charles Martin. In truth, I don't really blame him. There's no demand for a fight like that, and what Andy's gonna demand?
He wants big money. So Anthony is busy, and so is Deontay. Where does that leave Andy Ruiz? With some hope, maybe, just maybe, the Saudis can find use for him?
At this time, the PBC, they don't have anything for him to do or anyone for him to fight. That is, anyone that could get him the kind of money that he's looking for. So if he is really willing to fight the likes of a Zhang, I think Zhang would be receptive to such a fight. Zhang needs a dance partner. Zhang needs someone to fight. And if by some chance the Saudis are willing to bankroll it for sometime next year, I could go for a fight like that. Zhang versus Andy Ruiz. But Andy has to be realistic, and I don't think he's been realistic this last calendar year. He sat out all of this year. He hasn't seen action since September of last year when he fought Luis Ortiz. The story is his financial demands are the reason. He priced himself out of the Fury fight, and he priced himself out of the Wilder fight earlier this year. Now, he hasn't fought this entire calendar year, and he wants to be a part of something big. So he needs to be realistic.
On the undercard of that big December show, you're gonna find names like Junior Fa, Frankie Sanchez, Arslanbek Makhmudov, Filip Hrgovic. If they can find use for those fighters, then surely they can find use for Andy Ruiz. But it's Andy who needs to be realistic.
You may be a familiar name as far as familiar names go, but you're not necessarily a big name, or a big draw, I should say. You're not a big draw here in America. You've been on pay-per-view at least 2 times now on U.S. soil, and you didn't sell Bo Diddley.
You didn't sell squat. And if that's humbling, well, you need to be humbled. If you're willing to fight Zhang, I think the Saudis would be willing to pay for that.
The ideal placement for such a fight would be on the undercard of what could be Joshua versus Wilder next year, provided both guys take care of business in December. You could put Ruiz versus Zhang on the undercard as the co-main event.
Zhang is WBO interim champion. If you fight him and you beat him, that lines you up for a fight with the winner of Fury versus Usyk.
I think the real problem with such a fight is that while Zhang has boxed in the last 12 months, Andy Ruiz Jr., he hasn't. It's been over a year since his last fight, and it would be less than ideal to box somebody like Zhang under those circumstances, though beggars can't be choosers. Does Andy Ruiz really have a choice? Does he have an alternative?
This is all hypothetical anyway. He's actually painted into a corner with very few options, so he better jump on whatever anybody's offering him.
If he is offered a Zhang fight. And just in keeping with the theme of all things heavyweight, Deontay Wilder, who I just mentioned, Joshua asked for $50 million. We provided that, and he didn't take it. After his very cordial demeanor at the kickoff press conference for the Saudi Arabia show, Deontay Wilder gets away from the crowd, away from all those guys, and gets back to what he normally does.
Starts talking about the $50 million email and how Anthony is so afraid of him.
He asked for $50 million, and we provided that for him, and he did not take it. And the only way you can disregard that is to make a mockery of it, try to make a joke of it, try to make it seem to the public that it wasn't real, Wilder told the Daily Mail. It's an oh shit moment. They came up with $50 million. That's why they don't have Joshua speaking a lot on his own behalf, and if he does speak, he always slips up and says things that are not appealing to his people, and they have to play cleanup. It's his management that have held him back from fighting me because, you know, he's a fighter. It's been over 6 years waiting to do the fight, but there comes a point in time where you're like, forget it. Many times we wanted to fight. He wanted to accept it, but his handlers, he's trying to put the blame for all of this on Anthony Joshua's handlers. Deontay Wilder is a very dishonest, a very disingenuous guy.
He projects his own inadequacies onto Anthony Joshua because he's the one who slips up. He's the one that lets things out that reflect poorly on him, like when he let the world know that not only was DAZN's $100 million offer real, but it was in fact for 2 Anthony Joshua fights, where some content creators would have you believe that the money they were offering him wasn't for a Joshua fight or Joshua fights. Wilder admitted that it was, and it was more than he stood to make from the Fury fights.
When he brings up that entire fiasco with the $50 million email offer, whatever it was, there's a lot that he doesn't bring up. There's a lot that he leaves out. It all started with Eddie Hearn's initial offer to Deontay, who had not yet boxed on pay-per-view here in America or anywhere. Eddie Hearn offers him $12.5 million. Wilder counters that with the $50 million email, $50 million offer. What he leaves out is that $50 million was supposed to have been coming from BT Sport, the Queensbury side of things, where Anthony Joshua can't box. He was exclusively contracted to Sky at the time. He was not legally able to accept money from BT if he's exclusively contracted to Sky.
Eddie Hearn made his initial play to do the fight in early April, and Deontay Wilder countered with the $50 million email in late April.
Anthony, unable to accept an offer from a rival platform, that gets them nowhere. Then some time passes, and in June of that same year, Deontay ends up accepting Eddie Hearn's initial offer.
At least verbally. Contracts are drafted and sent to Team Wilder, at which point Team Wilder sits on those contracts for over a week. Doesn't sign them.
Knowing Alexander Povetkin was Anthony's mandatory challenger at the time, he was waiting in the queue. His promoter was putting pressure on the WBA to order the fight between him and Anthony. Knowing this, Team Wilder sit on those contracts, they don't sign them, at which point the WBA loses patience and orders the fight between Anthony and Alexander.
Afterwards, Wilder later admitted that the reason he didn't sign the contract to fight Anthony Joshua, even though he claims to have accepted the terms, was that he wanted a two-way rematch clause. He wanted some say-so too.
If Deontay Wilder was so confident at that time that he would beat Anthony Joshua, why would he have let something like a rematch clause stop him from getting in the ring with him? If you're so confident, you won't need the rematch clause. He will.
Because you're so confident you're gonna beat him, why would you need a rematch clause? See, what doesn't get said often enough in reference to this fight is that Wilder could never accept that he was the B-side to Anthony Joshua, at least at that time, even though Anthony was a box office fighter playing to much larger crowds than Wilder at that time. Wilder wasn't even on pay-per-view yet.
And what they offered Wilder, $12 million, was 6 times Wilder's highest purse at that time. They made him more offers afterwards, each offer bigger than the last, and it was Wilder that blew them off, even after DAZN offered him $100 million, and we've been all through that. You see, Deontay Wilder is a very disingenuous guy. You got all this stuff to say about Anthony and him being protected, but you didn't say any of that stuff when he was sat across from you.
All you did was wish him well, then shake his hand.
Kinda like how when him and Tyson Fury were sharing the same space not that long ago after their trilogy, Wilder's got all these negative things to say about Tyson Fury, but when he was right there in front of him, all he did was wish him well and shake his hand.
Bomb squad! Bomb squad!
Good. Four guys.
Good.
Bless.
Really doesn't keep the same energy with any of these people, and people actually fall for it because he's more boisterous, more vocal than Anthony Joshua.
More theatrical. He still needs people to believe that Anthony's so afraid of him.
It's an ego thing. American thing, I should say. I mean, fighters trash talk each other all over the world, but Americans uniquely seem to want people to believe that their contemporaries are so scared of them.
But take a closer look.